In this video, let's start creating some geometry for the lower center spoke on our steering wheel. Let's take a look at a reference image. You'll notice in the reference image that this lower spoke blends smoothly into our steering wheel. So we need to pay close attention to how we create this geometry. I'm going to start creating this geometry by creating a sketch on our right plane. I'm going to look at this from the other side. What we want to do is create a helper surface that starts somewhere out here in space and blends smoothly into the transition into our steering wheel. So I'm going to grab this edge, I'm going to convert it, turn it into a construction line in our current sketch. I'm going to draw a 4 construction line, snaps to this point, and let's say 8 millimeters out in space. Next, I want to draw a 4 construction line from my origin of our circle, snapping it horizontal to the edge of the circle. We can create a start and an endpoint spline that has a tangent relation with this circle. This is going to be the base when we create our boundary surface that's going to start the lower spoke on our steering wheel. The reason we're using this helper surface is to make sure we ensure proper continuity when we mirror this across our right plane. That should be a common theme by now and something that we really need to focus on to make sure the geometry is stable and that the end result is nice and smooth. The next thing we need to do is create a sketch on our front plane. For this, I'm going to go back down to my sweep feature. And I'm going to turn on the sketch that was used to create the center line of my sweep. I'm going to convert that into my sketch. Then I'm going to hide the original swept path. The next thing I want to do is create a 4 construction line out 28 millimeters. This is going to represent the spoke when we create our sweep or our boundary later. Next, I want to draw a spline. It's going to roughly approximate the shape of the surface we're going to create. I'm going to give this a vertical relation on the lower handle. And then I'm going to trim that converted surface that we created. Now it's important to note that we're not going to use this spline for anything. I just have it there as a reference for me to visualize what we're creating. So I'm going to turn this into construction geometry. The next thing I want to do is draw a line and then draw a 3-point arc going between these 2 endpoints. I'm going to apply a tangency to each section here. What this is going to do, this is going to allow me to trim away some of the steering wheel sweep here and give me room to create a boundary that sweeps into that profile nice and smooth. I'm going to give this a dimension, 8 millimeters, and we're going to use this as our reference sketch. So on the Surfaces tab, we're going to use Trim Surface. We're going to remove this intersection here. The next thing we want to do is start a sketch on this bottom face. Now remember, we have this helper surface we're going to create. That's going to help us create the boundary that goes between this back sketch we're creating now and blend smoothly into our steering wheel. So we're going to start by drawing a straight line. It's horizontal, 28 millimeters long. At 28 is the number we used when we did our front down sketch and trimmed away this section here. Next thing we want to do is create an extrude surface from that reference we created. Make sure it goes away from your geometry. This is going to be our helper. We know this helper surface is going to allow us to mirror across this, but it's also allowing us to ensure that we have tangency when we come into this section here. Now we're going to create a boundary surface going from this sketch up to this edge on our steering wheel. And for direction 2, we're going to use the helper surface we created. We want a tangent relation with that face. We want a tangent relation with this edge. We can also go back, modify our original sketch to have a curvature relation here as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we've created. I'm going to hide my helper surface. And let's take a look at this with a different background and real view graphics on. So the important part is that we look at the way the light and shadows go across these surfaces. You can go into something like grill lights, light card, or strip lighting to get a better reflective environment to make sure that we have nice smooth geometry that goes across all these. I think everything transitions fairly well, but let's take one last look at the Evaluate tab, look at the curvature. And this is where the real story is. This green section is a constant radius of curvature. The blue section is variable even though it's a consistent color throughout. So what we want to do is go back to this extruded sketch we created, and instead of just a tangent relation, we're going to give an equal curvature relation. In order to do that, we need to do a few more things to this sketch. I'm going to draw one more line, make sure that this line is construction as well, and we're going to trim this geometry away. Now we can grab this arc section. We can apply an equal curvature relation. Now notice what it's doing here. It's actually giving an equal curvature as if it was wrapping around this, and then it's blending down into this handle. This section here, we're going to taper it up to make sure we achieve the same kind of curvature we're looking for. You can see that changes things drastically on this end. And this allows us to go back to that last boundary surface, and instead of a tangent relation, we can apply a curvature to face relation. Let's give it some influence. Now you can see now the color bar blends across these two surfaces. This is going to give us a better transition when we're looking at renders later on. For now, let's go back to our original default 3-point faded, turn Real View Graphics off, turn our curvature analysis off. What we need to do now is create the same type of geometry for the lower portion of our spoke. This is going to be a little less crucial because it's not a portion that we're going to see, but I'm still going to use the same level of detail to create that geometry. So let's start on the right plane. And again, we're going to draw a construction line for reference. This time it's only going to be 4 millimeters. We want to bring this edge that's now trimmed into our sketch, make sure it's construction, and draw a spline between these two. Again, I'm going to use equal curvature, and I'm going to use the spline handle to control the geometry. This is going to be used to create our helper surface. Then we can create a sketch on this face that allows us to create a straight line that snaps to our geometry and again is 28 millimeters long. Now we can create a boundary surface going from that edge to this lower edge using this helper surface as a guide. We apply a tangency to face with that and apply an equal curvature with our edge. Hide our helper surface. Now we've created the base geometry for the lower spoke on our steering wheel.